Hello, everyone, and welcome to English 200, 201, 202. This is week 3. This week, you're going to be reading Chapter 2 in Serious Daring, and you're also going to be reading the poems that are included in this lecture. This week, we are focusing on the element of images, symbols, and figurative language and poetry. So I'd like to just kind of sit back and think about what poetry actually is. And I have two definitions, one from the poet Emily Dickinson. If I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold no fire can warm me, I know that is poetry. If I feel psychically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. So when Emily describes poetry, it's almost a visceral reaction, right? It has to hit her in a way that affects her in her body. Matthew Zapruder, in his wonderful book, Why Poetry, writes, "Language waits to be released in poetry. Poetry enacts the possibilities and powers that lie dormant in the nature of language itself." How to read a poem. Just so you know, a poem is not some secret code that you have to unlock. When you read a poem, though, you have to read it really carefully and closely and think about what every word means. You want to use a good dictionary, like the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, remember, we have free access to the Oxford English Dictionary as Napa Valley College students. And if you go to the library website and click on databases, you'll see a link to the Oxford English Dictionary. Realize when you're reading a poem that the portal to the strange is the literal. That by telling us the smallest details that are totally personal, right? We understand greater things. Good poets do not deliberately complicate something just to make it harder for a reader to understand. Know when you're writing poetry, you don't need to invert your sentences or use stilted language. That's not necessary. Okay, you can use everyday language and make a huge impact on the reader. So images are created by using concrete language, by describing things that you can see, that you can taste, that you can touch, that you can smell, or that you can hear. The more sensory rich an image is, the more we, as readers, can viscerally feel it. That means we can totally feel it in our bodies. Here's a picture of an imaginary garden with a real toad in it. The idea is, as Marion Moore says, poetry is a place where you got to put real things in there that we can see and we can touch and we can feel, okay? You can make this imaginary landscape, but within it, there's got to be something that we connect to in some way. So how do you create sensory-infused images? Sensory-infused images help the reader enter the world of your writing. They actually activate your limbic system, creating physical responses. Abstractions like love, hate, greed, jealousy, they do not convey the specificity of the situation. Ironically, the more specific your writing is, the more powerful and effective it will be. Passive verbs, linking verbs, all forms of the verb to be also do little to illuminate language. So let's try it. And you're welcome to pull out your journal and write along with me as we go through this, okay? Like I would ask you to do in class. So write down a word. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to write down the word eucalyptus tree. And now I want you to think about, because I see a eucalyptus tree outside my office every day. Write down the word and then try and describe it using your 5 senses. A really great way to do this is to set a little timer on your iPhone. I'm going to do it right now. Set a little timer on your iPhone for 1 minute and time yourself. And you'll hear me do this right now, okay? Set it for 1 minute and then a little alarm will go off, okay? So begin by put your pencil on the page and begin by writing down everything that you can think of regarding what you can see when you see a eucalyptus tree. Go ahead and start. I wrote bark that is red and raw, wet with the dew of dawn, thin fingers reaching down back to the earth, leaves alert as antennae, shuffling in the wind against a blue sky. Keep going. Twenty more seconds. 10 seconds. Okay. Now what I'd like you to do is think about the smell. I'd like you to spend a minute writing down everything that you smell when you're around a eucalyptus tree. Go ahead and go. I wrote sharp as high winds, medicinal like a hot bath, a cavern of calm water. Keep going. You're at 30 seconds. Keep writing what you associate with smell in regards to eucalyptus trees. 15 more seconds. Okay, now we're going to move on to taste. Now here you have to use your imagination. What would a eucalyptus tree taste like? Okay, you have to think of stories to fill this in. Go ahead and start. I wrote, dusty and long traveled, the belly of old ships, the desperation of farmers. Keep going. You're halfway there. Keep writing. Get weird. Fifteen more seconds. Okay. Now we're going to move on to touch. Imagine that you're feeling the bark, the leaves, the area around a eucalyptus tree. Go ahead and start. I wrote, bark that can be smooth as glass or rough as a deep sea, strong soil, damp from a new rain. Keep going. You are halfway there. Keep going. Fifteen seconds to go. Get weird. Okay, this is the last one. Now I want you to write down every sound that you can associate with a eucalyptus tree. Okay? Go ahead and start. I wrote the cry of winds, the whisper of leaves, the ache of tall, thin bodies moving in the wind. Crunch of leaves underneath my feet. Keep writing. You've got 30 seconds to go. Fifteen more seconds. All right, good job, you guys. That was a good warm-up. Now, if you got stuck anywhere on this and you're like, I don't know anything about eucalyptus trees, do this again and just insert your own tree. Okay? Some tree that you know well. Maybe it's a redwood, maybe it's a bay tree, something that you know and can see, or go outside and look and find a tree and write about that one, okay? I want you to just connect with it and try to spend 1 minute writing on each one of these senses. The other thing you got to think about, guys, when you are trying to mine the information around a word, is to think about density and doubleness. So when a word, image, or idea has more than one meaning, it raises the intensity of feeling suggested by the poem. Denotation is just the basic dictionary definition, the kind that suggests words correspond in a one-on-one fashion with objects and gestures. A table is just a table. An apple is just an apple, right? We all know this is not the case, right? In fact, dictionaries weren't even invented until the late 1800s. Words were not locked in for their meaning or their spelling. Connotations, though, that means the more complex range of associations and subtle implications that a word gives off. Now, we're going to do another exercise, and what I'd like you to do is think of a word. I usually use a word like a real simple noun like lake or apple or let's see, what's another one? Salt is a good one. Like some word that you might not, that might have some other meanings to it. But it has to be like a simple noun. Okay, so I would just, if you can, just start with the word lake. And I'd like you to look up the definition for the word in the dictionary. I looked this one up and it means a large body of water surrounded by land. Okay? Now, I want you to think of all the connotations that you have about this word. These connotations can be cultural or completely personal, like a memory you have or a story you've heard. A good way to tap into the connotations is to do a free write or a timed writing exercise where you write down everything that comes to your mind about the word continuously for 5 minutes, like without picking up your pen from the page. So here's a shorter free write that I did on the word lake. Lake, blue, and this is after visiting Lake Tahoe recently. Lake, blue, deep, drought, camp, cold, hula pie, water ski, canoe, hike, deep, sunken stones. Now I could further this by adding in experiences like heart stops when I jump in, think of mind goes numb after 50 strokes, the sound of the boat engine underwater, swimming to the buoy, how my skin feels after being submerged in the cool. It feels alive. Looking out at the mountain range that surrounds the lake like a spine. Okay, you see what I'm doing? I'm just letting myself go, right? Just freestyling, just trying to think of things that I see when I'm connected with Lake Tahoe. So for me, I'm just talking about Lake Tahoe, but you can talk about any lake that you'd like. Maybe you want to go back to the poem The Lake Isle of Innisfree and think about Yeats Lake. It's up to you. But what I want you to do, this is not stuff you have to turn in, you guys. The last exercise and this exercise are warm-ups. These are just to get your brain loose and ready to write poetry, okay? So take a moment and write for 5 minutes on the word lake or another word like apple, and just try to free associate. Let your brain get weird, go all over the place, and write your way through 5 minutes. All right, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about making greater meaning through figurative language. There's two main pieces of figurative language. There's the metaphor, and that's something that assumes states of comparison between two things without acknowledging the comparison. So here's some examples. My electric muscles shook the crowd. Her hair is seaweed and she is the sea. They have a piggy and a fishy air. The bees shouldering the grass. A simile makes a comparison between two things using like or as. His teeth rattled like dice in a box. My head is light as a balloon. I will fall like an ocean on that court. Another part of metaphor and simile is tenor and vehicle. These are the parts of the actual metaphor or simile. So in the phrase, my uncle is a toad, or my uncle is like a toad, the tenor, the subject of any comparison, is my uncle. So in both of these, my uncle is the subject, the tenor. The vehicle carries a host of associations back to the tenor. So in this case, the uncle the tenor is affected by the vehicle toad. So in this case, toads are slimy, green, ugly, floppy, squishy, loud, right? When you're writing, ask yourself, does the word toad convey the feelings you want to convey about your uncle through all of these associations? Maybe instead you could try, my uncle is a snarling stray cat. So I want you to think carefully when you make a metaphor, or simile, what the vehicle is that you're associating with your tenor, right? And if it matches. And if it makes the feeling that you want it to make. Here are two more types of figurative language. Allusion, that's when you make a reference to a piece of literature or a piece of art. Allusions are often used to summarize broad, complex ideas or emotions in one quick, powerful image. Say you wanted to refer to something in regards to Hamlet by Shakespeare, right? You'd make a little nod to an image or a phrase that happens in Shakespeare, or you could allude to something in the Bible, or you could allude to something in some work that most people know. Personification, this is when you give human attributes to non-human things. And here's some examples of that. So here's the poem Tree by Harriet Mullen. Tree. Yes, I'm grounded, like all the little bushes attached to the earth at the ankles. What saves me is my madness, the racket of birds singing loud in my tangled hair. Or Young Sycamore by William Carlos Williams. Young Sycamore. I must tell you, this young tree, whose round and firm trunk between the wet pavement and the gutter, where water is trickling, rises bodily into the air with one undulant thrust half its height, and then, dividing and waning, sending out young branches on all sides, hung with cocoons, it thins till nothing is left of it but two eccentric knotted twigs bending forward, horn-like at the top. All right, now we are on to our journal exercises. This one is based off of Emily Dickin's poem, Hope is a Thing with Feathers. And, the way that I'd like you to operate in this class, as I've mentioned, is to please watch the lecture on Monday or Tuesday in the week. It's 30 minutes of your time. If you make the time, then you'll know what's available, what you need to get done. If you wait until Sunday, you'll have missed deadlines, and you're really trying to pack in a lot of work, like 10 hours of work, right? On the last day of class. So I want you to do really well in this class, but in order for you to do well, I make these lectures so that you can at least preview them or listen to them in the early part of the week so you know what is due. The idea behind it is that you will complete your journal exercises earlier in the week and then think about one of them that you want to work with more and turn into a final poem. And I want you to spend time on revising that poem. So let's start with our first journal prompt. This is Hope is the Thing with Feathers. It's based on this poem by Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest is the gale, and sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asks a crumb of me. I'd like you to think about an abstract idea like hope, love, hate, jealousy, beauty, or fear, or any other one that you can think of. Each of these words means something different to whoever uses it. My definition of hope is different than Emily Dickinson's, as likely as yours. But who doesn't feel what that first stanza means, that hope, bird-like, perches inside us, in our soul, as Dickinson puts it, and sings to us perpetually as we go about our day. So that no matter how hard things get, hope will always be there, humming a tune and trying to lighten our load. It's in the second stanza that we really get to see what hope is made of, because when a big storm hits, when life gets really hard, the bird doesn't stop singing, no matter what. Finally, in the last stanza, Dickinson tells us that she's not the only one who has hope. It's universal. And what is most astonishing to hear to her is that even working so hard, supporting so many people around the world, hope is still there for her every day, and it never asks her for anything. What makes this poem so extraordinary is how Dickinson clearly defines what hope is, and how we as readers believe it. What would it be like if you chose another word like love or hate or fear and let it become something else? To make it work, you have to really stretch your imagination. You have to not make sense. Poetry asks that of you. And you have to use a lot of sensory imagery. So let's start by choosing an abstract word. Okay, take a moment, choose an abstract word, and then start the lecture again. Now I'd like you to think about what that word is like to you specifically. Is it soft or hard, loud, or quiet, colorful or bland? What color is the word? Is it a person, place, or thing? What does it look like, sound like, feel like when you touch it with your hand? What would it taste like if you could taste it? And here is a great place to get really weird, okay? If I were to taste hope, I think it would taste like stardust. Now that you have an idea of what your abstract idea looks like to you, I'd like you to think about how it serves you, or how does it make your life difficult? When was the last time you felt that emotion or idea? If your abstract idea were to battle against something and win or lose, what would it battle? Now think about how your abstract idea serves other people. Do other people benefit from it, or does it make other people's lives more difficult? And what, in the end, does it expect of you, or anybody else for that matter? Now it's time to put it all together. In poetry, we try to choose the best word possible to make the reader feel the most when they read the poem. As you start to compose your poem, think about how long you want your lines to be. Just remember, short lines move more quickly than long lines. How can you make your words as specific as possible? Don't use the word black. Tell us how black it is. Is it raven? Is it jet? Is it coal? For those who are stuck, and I really, really, really want you guys, especially if you're in 201 or 202, to not use this, right? This format if you're totally stuck, okay? to mimic Emily Dickinson's poem. But I do want you to follow these questions, right? So you could start with just the line, right? Jealousy is the thing you're comparing it to, or hate is the thing you're comparing it to, and then explain what the thing you are comparing it to does. Then you say the thing your abstract word could battle, and then talk about the battle and how your abstract word as a new thing fares. And then in the last stanza, what does the abstract thing mean to everyone else, and what does it ask of you? Okay? So those of you in 201, 202, I want to see you break out of this form and really try to get weird as you can, okay? Really weird. All right, the second journal exercise we're going to be working on this week is based on Juan Felipe Herrera's poem exercise, 5 Directions to My House. Here's his poem. 1. Go back to the grain yellow hills where the broken speak of elegance. 2. Walk up to the canvas door, the short bed stretched against the clouds. 3. Beneath the earth an ant writes with the grace of a governor. 4. Blow, blow, red-tail hawk, your hidden sleeve, your desert secrets. 5. You are there, almost, without a name, without a body. Go now. 6. I said 5. Said 5 like a guitar says 6. So Juan Felipe Herrera writes about the feelings of his house in his direction poem. When he tells you to begin at the yellow grain hills where the broken speak of elegance, he sets the scene for a poem where he's trying to paint his home through the emotions it and everything around it, the hawk, the red earth, make him feel. In the end, he even breaks his own rules by giving us 6 directions instead of 5. I'd like you to try to write a poem about your home by giving us directions on how to get to your home emotionally. Start by telling us where your home is, but don't give us the address. Instead, think about the environment around your home and how it makes you feel. What specific things could you name that would make someone feel the way you feel when you are going to your home? Tell us how to enter your home, and tell us what your home feels like when you enter it. Tell us what is under your home: gophers, earthworms, soggy soil, limestone. Name an animal you hear at your home. What could it be telling you or us? What does it feel like to be in your home? And then end your poem by breaking a rule. Now, I wrote a poem using this exercise after the fires in 2017, and here's my example. 1. Follow the ash heaps, the hills arching their black skin. History hums like a refrigerator underneath. You should have listened. 2. These days the sky, bruised cloud sky, is obscenely open. Look closely enough and you can see up her skirt. 3. Look for the door in the mountain, steel toothed, sealed with wax. 4. They say spring in all her glory. They say the quick and the dead. They say bright green stitches will rewrite this landscape. Will we know it? 5. Dump trucks heavy with debris, hawks circle, catching thermals, a drone humming on the horizon, taking pictures of the dead. 6. Will I always be afraid of a warm wind? Okay, you guys, I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys end up writing for your 5 directions, or just directions to my home, okay? The last exercise we're going to work on is based on Pablo Neruda's Ode to Salt. He has a whole book of odes called Odes to Common Things, to socks, you name it. But this poem, you can hear it read aloud if you click on the link below by Phil Levine, who's an excellent poet. But I'm just going to read it to you quickly. And what I want you to think about is all the stories underneath the definition. This is a connotation poem, okay? So think back to that exercise when we thought of all the connotations, all the things, stories, ideas surrounding the word lake, right? I want you to do that with whatever object you choose. Ode to salt. This salt in the salt cellar I once saw in the salt mines. I know you won't believe me, but it sings. Salt sings. The skin of the salt mines sings with a mouth smothered by the earth. I shivered in those solitudes when I heard the voice of the salt in the desert. Near Antofagasta, the nitrous pampa resounds, a broken voice, a mournful song. In its caves the salt moans, mountain of buried light, translucent cathedral, crystal of the sea, oblivion of the waves. And then on every table in the world, salt. We see your piquant powder sprinkling vital light upon our food. Preserver of the ancient holds of ships, discoverer on the high seas, earliest sailor of the unknown, shifting byways of the foam, dust of the sea, in you the tongue receives a kiss from ocean night. Taste imparts to every seasoned dish your ocean essence. The smallest miniature wave from the salt cellar reveals to us more than domestic whiteness. In it, we taste finitude. All right. So what I'd like you to do is to go back and listen to Ode to Salt, follow that link, and think about the fact that an ode is a celebration. In this ode, we will be celebrating an ordinary object. So I'd like you to think about what ordinary object you might want to choose. It could be a fork, it could be a tulip, it could be an apple or an iPhone. It's completely up to you, okay? I'd like you to observe what it looks like, sounds like, smells like, tastes like, feels like. Okay, use that same idea, right, that we used before. First, look up the word and look up the actual object's definition, dictionary definition. What are all the definitions of this word, and what is its history? Look at its etymology, right? Then set a timer for 5 to 10 minutes and just free associate all the connotations your word produced. What are the secret stories hiding in your word? Then I'd like you to write a poem that is at least 30 lines long where you explore all of this, okay? All right, now for those of you in 200, you can just skip over this section. Those of you who are in English 200 or 201 or 202, we are starting our Poem a Day workshop on Friday, February 1st. And you're going to be writing a poem every day in February. Please post a poem on each day in the discussion forum called Poem a Day. You're not required to respond to your peers' posts, but it would be really nice to do so. And it would build community. And just so you know, I'll be suffering with you. I'm going to be writing a poem a day too in solidarity. I'm actually doing it as a fundraiser for Tupelo Press. Prompts are listed below. Feel free to write directly off of the prompts or to just write toward them, meaning just do your best. You're not going to be graded on how close you are to the prompt. You're graded on completing 28 poems in 28 days. Just make that commitment to write a poem a day no matter what. You are allowed one day where you just write a haiku if you need a little break, okay, or you have like a really busy day. Otherwise, try and write full, complete drafts of poems each day. So for the first day, I'd like you to write about a little-known Greek or Roman character, or a well-known, it's up to you, who you feel was misunderstood in some way. I'm going to be writing about Circe, I think. I've been reading this novel called Circe by Madeline Miller. That's really good. And I've also read a book by Ursula Le Guin called Lavinia, which is about, so Circe was in the Odyssey. She's the witch that bewitched Odysseus and turned his men into pigs. And the Lavinia was a really small character in the Iliad. So you don't have to like, if you're not a weirdo and like Greek mythology and Roman mythology as much as me, you don't have to. I mean, a good place to look is just look at Ovid's Metamorphosis, or just Google Greek mythology and see what comes up, and start just looking around and see what interests you, and give yourself, 5-10 minutes to find something and then start writing, okay? Second poem, and there's no like rules on what these poems look like. I'd like you to just try, okay? February 2nd, I'd like you to read Mary Oliver's poem, Hummingbirds. There's a link to it here, and just make note that it's 2 pages long, so you'll have to click through. Then I'd like you to write a poem where you encounter an animal that transforms you in some way. On February 3rd, I'd like you to write a poem with the word imbroglio in it. And there's a page here with a history of the word and information on, the etymology and all of that. And you can just use it however you want, okay? And then February 4th, which happens to be my birthday, I'd like you to take a walk or a hike somewhere, maybe that you've never been or you haven't looked at closely in a long time. And then I'd like you to write a poem while you're walking or immediately after walking. And if you need some inspiration, there's an incredible essay up on Poetry Foundation by the poet Brian Tier about the process of composing eco poetry while hiking. So these are some ideas about how to revise your poems. Those of you who are in 200, you can revise any of the exercises that we did, not the free writes, but the ode or the 5 directions. So you can do the ode, the 5 directions, or hope is the thing with feathers, okay? Take one of them and really spend time revising them. Make sure there's a title every time. Make sure you've started with a concrete image, right? You've gotten rid of all your cliches, right? Phrases that you see again and again. Remember, you want to make it new. You want to make it fresh in your poem. Make sure you've chosen the best possible words, right? If you're using a metaphor or simile, make sure the vehicle is really transforming the tenor. And make sure that if you do have a title, make sure it's really contributing to the meaning of the poem. Read your poem out loud to yourself before you turn it out. Think about the sound, right? Do you have alliteration in there, right? Do your line breaks contribute to the meaning and rhythm of your poem? The words that you leave as the last line at the last end of your line, they hold more meaning, or the words at the beginning of the line. Both of those positions hold more meaning in a poem. If you've used repetition of sounds, make sure that it's meaningful, right? And if you're using a form, we haven't really talked about that yet, so don't worry about it yet. But if you are, see if you're using it in a way that makes it new, okay? All right, so by Sunday, I'd like you to type up a revision of one of your exercises, your journals, and turn it in so that I can give you feedback on it, okay? I'm trying to catch up. There's a lot of you in this class, and I will do my best to give you feedback. A really great way to get feedback really quickly is stop by my office hours, which I will remind you are on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 12:30 and from 1:30 to 3. All right, guys, that's it for today. Keep up the good work. Watch these lectures, please. I put a lot of effort into building them, and I really, really, really want you guys to watch them because I don't get to actually see you in class, and this is where I'm conveying the information to you. So I guess if you've gotten to this point and listened to that, you've probably watched the lecture. All right, have a great week, and I will see you online.